Welcome to Buzz Around the World by India Today. After surviving 2 alleged attempts of poisoning, a staunch critic of Kremlin and Russian President Putin, another Vladimir Kara-Murza has been sentenced to 25 years in a high-security prison on treason and other charges for criticizing the Ukraine offensive. This is harshest sentence ever against an opposition figure in recent years. A Moscow court found the 41-year-old guilty of treason, of spreading false information about the Russian army and of links to an undesirable organization, after a closed-door trial. Kara-Murza appeared in a cage, wearing blue jeans and a black t-shirt and grey blazer. He smiled and gestured to his supporters to write to him in prison. His wife Evgenia Kara-Murza said the sentence demonstrated the fear the government of Russian President Vladimir Putin had of outspoken critics like him.
This sentence shows that they're so afraid of him and they hate him so much for his consistency, for his courage, for his amazing bravery. They're so afraid of him and they hate him so much that they want to lock him up for a quarter of a century. Well, Vladimir has always been a very strong person, so he remains a very strong person inside.
In October, he was charged with treason over remarks critical of Moscow made at 3 public events abroad. Kara-Murza suffers from a nerve condition called polyneuropathy, which his lawyers say was due to 2 poisoning attempts in 2015 and 2017 but continued to spend long periods in Russia. The condition has worsened in prison, and he was too unwell to attend some of his hearings. The Western-educated journalist was a close associate of opposition leader Boris Nemtsov, who was shot dead near the Kremlin in 2015, and Mikhail Khodorkovsky, a former oligarch turned critic of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Almost all Putin's major opponents have either fled the country or are in jail. Putin's vocal domestic critic Alexei Navalny was arrested in January 2021 upon returning from Germany, where he was recovering from a poison attack that he blamed on the Kremlin. From prison, Navalny said he considered the verdict unlawful, shameless and simply fascist. In 2020, Navalny became severely ill and fell into a coma while visiting a Siberian city. He was airlifted to Germany in critical condition and found to have been poisoned with a nerve agent. Since launching the offensive in Ukraine in February last year, Russia has clamped down on critics by enforcing a law that bans criticism of the war and military. On February 1st, a Moscow court found prominent Russian journalist Alexander Nevzorov guilty of disseminating false news about the Russian army and sentenced him in absentia to 8 years in prison. Ilya Yashin, one of the few well-known Kremlin critics to have remained in Russia since the outbreak of the Ukraine war, was detained in June while walking in a Moscow park and sentenced to 8.5 years in jail for distributing false information about Russian soldiers. The charge stemmed from a live stream on YouTube in which he talked about civilians killed in the Kyiv suburb of Bucha. Another conviction was of Alexei Moskalyov, a 54-year-old father whose 13-year-old daughter made a drawing considered critical of the war in school. These are a few. There are many others who are facing clampdown and legal process for speaking against Putin. Do tell us what you think about this video in the comments section, and for more news updates, subscribe to India Today.